ID Microeconomics, higher level students only. So today we'll learn about goals of firms. Let's move on. Before we start, we have to understand what is profit. So we've learned before that to understand profit, we need to know the TC and TR, which is total cost and total revenue. So there are three types of profits. First, abnormal profit, loss-making, and normal profit. So for abnormal profit is when total revenue is more than total cost. And for loss-making firms, their total revenue is less than total cost. And normal profit is when total revenue equals to total cost. So let's keep this in mind and let's move on. So the main goals of firm is to maximize their profit. And we can categorize firms as profit maximizers or loss minimizers. And to do that, we compare their quantity. So when they're profit maximizing, we compare the total revenue and total cost. When loss minimizing, we compare the marginal cost and marginal revenue. Before we start analyzing, we have to understand some key points. So first, loss in product curves are not affected by the firm's market power. By market power, it means the ability of the firms to influence the market price. And the shape of demand curve depends on the firm's market power. And lastly, only the revenue curves are affected by the existence of market power. So you have to remember to keep this in mind. Let's move on. So in the case of price takers, meaning that they have no market power, we compare their total cost and total revenue. So since they have no market power, since they are price takers, their total revenue will be an outward sloping curve. And their total cost, I hope you guys remember, will look like that. Since when they have negative economic profit. So to maximize their profit, you have to compare this point when total cost is at its minimum. So total cost minus total revenue would be a negative, but it will be minimized since it's at this curve, it's at this point. But when the firm have a positive economic profit, their total cost curve would look like this. Again, we compare its minimum point, which is at this quantity. So at this point, total revenue minus total cost is a positive. And to maximize that, it has to be in the minimum point, because think of it, it's obvious, right? Yeah. I hope you have drawn the graph on your notebooks. Let's move on. So for price setters, their total revenue curve will be different because they can influence their price. So when their price increases, their quantity decreases. So their total revenue curve would look like this, right? And their total cost curve would be the same. When it's negative profit, economic profit, it will look like that. So again, at the minimum point, which is at this point, this quantity, it will be minimized. The difference will be minimized. So at this situation, they're loss minimizing. And at this situation, when it's positive economic profit, again, total revenue would be the same, and total cost would be like this. So again, at the minimum point, at this quantity, simple, right? So just remember this curve. It is important because it is the main goal of firms to maximize their profit. So write this down. Now it's MC and MR. As I said before, it's to compare their loss minimization. And for price takers, their demand curve will be the same as their marginal revenue. I hope you guys remember this. And for a marginal cost, it'll look like this, right? And at this point, when MC equals to MR, it is when they're maximizing their profit at this point. And for price setters, this is their demand curve. This would be their marginal revenue. And then marginal cost would be the same. So at this point, they're loss minimizing. So like you have to be careful about the intersection. This curve is important. For like when you're learning like the market structures, you would use this curve a lot. So remember these graphs. Other than profit maximizing, there are other alternative goals that firms may undertake. So the first is revenue maximization, second, growth maximization, third, satisficing, and fourth, corporate social responsibility. We'll go over all these goals of the firms. So first, let's start with revenue maximization. So there are some reasons for revenue maximization. And first, you have to keep in mind that there are separation of ownership and management in modern corporation. So the first, hired managers may have different objectives from their shareholders. And because managers may seek to maximize sales revenue rather than profit. So these are the main reasons why a modern firm may undertake revenue maximization other than profit maximization. So let's move on. These are the reasons why a firm may choose to revenue maximization. And first, it's because of their high proportion of fixed cost in their production. And because of that, when their total revenue increases, naturally their profit would increase. By that I mean because of the high proportion of fixed cost, their total cost would not increase as much when their quantity of production increases. So that means the profit will increase much more than their total cost. And second, it is an easier identification and a better targets for employees than profit. I hope you guys remember how to calculate revenue. It is P times Q, right? So it's a really simple identification of how the firm is progressing than profit. And third, compensations and influences of managers are often linked with sales revenue. I think by this I mean incentive. So managers may have more incentive because they achieved the revenue that they were wanting to achieve. So these are some of the reasons why a firm may choose to revenue maximize. Let's move on. To identify the point where a firm is maximizing their revenue, it is by the marginal revenue curve. This case is only when the firm has market power, meaning that the firm is a price setter or a price maker, whatever you want to call it. And at this point is when they're maximizing their revenue. So remember, when MR equals to 0, they're maximizing their revenue. Important. Okay. Let's move on. alternative goal a firm may choose is to maximize their growth. In this case, growth means the scale growth of in the long run, and by choosing to maximize their growth, a firm may receive possible benefits from economies of scale. I hope you guys remember what this means. And it is a better explanation of the behavior of startup companies. Like for industries or companies, it may be better for them to largen up their firm first before they can do any actions. This is highly linked with this point. So when their market or the company is bigger, their ability to have more market power is more possible. So this growth maximization would largely help them. So the third, I guess, is satisficing. You guys may be unfamiliar with this word, satisficing. It is the combination of satisfy and suffice. So next I'll show you the definition. The definition of satisficing is choosing an alternative which is not the optimal solution, but it is a solution that can satisfy and it is good enough for everyone. So in other words, it is choosing a satisfactory solution which is accepted or reasonable over the best solution. It is because the best solution may cost a lot of time, effort, or money in order to achieve that. For example, profit maximization may be hard for a firm because maybe their fixed cost is larger. So, in that in mind, it may be better for them to pick to satisfy rather than profit maximization. Okay. And lastly, it is corporate social responsibility. I heard that this is very important in your new guide, so you have to remember this. It is to aim to encourage companies to be more aware of the impacts of their businesses on the rest of the society. This highly includes the environment and their own stakeholders. So in this, nowadays, it is really important that they are aware of their contribution to the environment and due to sustainable development. An example of this would be Unilever. It is a company that has a lot of other companies. And so, yeah, that's the end.